It's Saturday night and you're with the Saturday Five. I'm Darren Grimes and I can promise that you're in for a very lively show. Alex Armstrong has already reported me to HR. Let's crack on with tonight's first debate. I'm going to kick us off because you know me, folks. Until Alex Armstrong kicks me out of the way, it's my rules. Right?
Just so the audience know, I'm getting the ultimate revenge on Darren tonight. Just so you watch and see.
Yeah.
Stay tuned. You're not going to want to miss this show. You're not going to want to miss this show.
Right, moving on from his big gob. I've got big news for you, my friends. I've joined the European Court of Human Rights. I am their new agony aunt. Because I say if you can't beat 'em, join 'em. And with the salary, the expenses and the bottomless Prosecco lunches, how could I possibly say no? So here's what's landed in my inbox this week. So I had this come in. Dear Darren, I'm an Albanian gangster, but my son won't eat chicken nuggets. Can I stay? And I say, of course. Britain can't risk nugget-related trauma. And another one. Dear Darren, I'm a Pakistani paedophile. They want to deport me, but my kids might miss me. What do I do? And I say, don't panic. Just say separating families is cruel. After all, it's only British children at risk. Dear Darren, I've failed asylum 7 times. Have you any tips? Yes, my friends. Become a terrorist. It worked wonders for a Nigerian woman. She failed 7 times. She joined a jihadi group and suddenly, bingo, right in. Dear Darren, I got married for a visa, but I wasn't actually there. Can I stay? Absolutely. Here, attendance is optional. You just say it was spiritually binding or that you were too busy protesting for Gaza and hey presto, passport in the post. Dear Darren, I'm a Zimbabwean paedophile, but deportation might be unpleasant for me. What should I do? Oh, heaven forbid, eh? Zimbabwe don't like those pedos, eh? Not so in little old Blighty? Come on in. Not a bother. Dear Darren, I used to be an ISIS, but my police mugshot is ugly. Can they redo it? No problem, pet. The police now offer full PR services for terrorists. We'll let you in, you can cover yourself in your most fabulous niqab, and you'll be safe from the police's oppressive glare. And there you have it. That's my first week as an agony aunt for the ECHR. All of those, by the way, are real cases that have come out this week alone. You couldn't make it up, could you? But don't worry, Britain. If you work hard, if you pay your taxes, if you follow the law, no one will give a toss about you. Anyway, Kai, you must have been really supportive of all of my advice there. You must have thought, Darren, I could not have possibly said that any better myself.
Look, Darren, we obviously both agree that these cases are indefensible, but they are extreme cases. Now, this is madness that the Tories legislated for, and then Reform and the Tories voted against the Borders and Security Bill. Brexit, prior to that, removed the returns agreement that we had and criminalised it, making smuggling easier. So actually, Labour's just now saying if you come through an unsafe route, you can't get citizenship. And the Reform and the Tories opposed that. Now, this is the real deterrent. And actually, what is lacking from your monologue is an idea of the solution.
That was my second job.
But what's your solution here? Because we are where we are.
The solution is that we say, no, thank you, pedos be gone.
But these are extreme cases, I'm sorry.
Extreme cases?
And actually, the way they've been characterised...
7 of them in 1 week.
The way you're characterising them is in order to create panic and to over-exaggerate, actually, what is going on.
So, Kai, let me ask you a very straight question, then. And that wasn't meant to be funny. The message, what would your message be to the families who live around the paedophile who was told that he could stay in Britain because he has to take care of his children? Not a safeguarding risk at all. What would your message be to the parents of children who have to live around this?
But he should be in prison, and if he's served his time,
he should be able to stay in prison.
Then we have to have a way of people who commit crimes then being re-entered into society.
No, he should be deported.
Surely.
Why should he not be deported?
Because if he has a legal right to stay in the UK, then he's our responsibility. And we have a pattern here of shirking responsibility for people who are legally allowed to stay.
Are you shirking your... by the way, Emma, I called you Emma Webb. I'm so sorry. Emma Trimble. Emma Trimble.
It's all right. I'm transitioning.
Yes.
How do you identify? Yeah.
The problem is the interpretation of the law, right?
Yep.
So this guy who was allowed to stay despite being convicted for paedophilia was allowed to stay on the basis of his right to a family life because he has 2 toddlers who he's not allowed to live with anyway. But even if he was, that's a ridiculous way of interpreting the right to a family life. Never mind the danger that he poses to British children here. There was another case where there was a guy who had been convicted. We couldn't deport him. One of the ways that they got him to win his appeal was on the right to a family life again, and his kids had been in prison for various crimes themselves. So what kind of family life are we talking about here? So actually, yes, that to some degree the law is the problem, but the problem is also the way that activist judges are interpreting that law, and it puts everyone at risk. And my view, personally, is that if somebody, say you mentioned, somebody who might be discriminated against back in their own country because they've been convicted of paedophilia here, well, my view is if you don't want to get deported, don't commit a crime. It's not our responsibility. If you've committed a crime, it doesn't matter what happens to you when you go back to your country.
I couldn't give a damn what happens when they go back there.
The Gaza decision was made by someone whose father was a Guardian writer who was an activist in favour of Palestine. The judicial activism and the mission creep is a real significant problem.
It really is. And I also want to go back to something that Kai was saying about it being the Tories' fault. And don't get me wrong, I hold the Tories in contempt for not changing these laws. I really do, and I've not been clear about that ever. But actually, this goes back to Tony Blair. He adopted mass amounts of these ridiculous laws into the human rights laws that he created, which are also supported by the ECHR, and we can't get rid of them, and the Tories certainly couldn't get rid of them without Labour saying, you're all dictators, you want to overthrow the human rights bill, which is, again, a very, very difficult thing for Tories to do without being slammed on the front pages for being called dictators and fascists.
Will, do you believe that we have a duty of care to foreign paedophiles? Like Kai does.
I'm on national television at the moment, so yes, no, I don't believe that we have a duty of care to foreign paedophiles. But I think Emma hit the nail on the head that even if we do get out of the ECHR, which I think we should, the ideological capture of the bench
I agree.
means that even if we get out of that awful convention, they're going to interpret other laws in a way which will seriously damage this country. I think that's where we need to start. How do we address the ideological capture of the, Islington class of judges that are now taking over this country?
Yeah, he's not happy.
Yeah. Well, they have, haven't they? Will's absolutely right. The judiciary run this country, so even if you vote for change, it doesn't matter because they're going to be an activist judge who's interpreting the law in a way that it suits them. He's right, isn't he?
To impugn the judiciary in this country, as you all are, is just awful, and that undermines trust in the entire
system. You just got a list of things from Darren. You just got a list of things from Darren, Kai. You just got a list of things that...
Let's actually blame politicians who, 14 years of Tory government failed to repeal the laws that Tony Blair enacted. If it was such an issue...
I agree.
I blame the Tories.
I've got a lot of agree. You don't.
The judges.
Here's the thing. You can interpret a law in any way you see fit, and particularly with these types of human rights laws, they can be interpreted very broadly, and they can be interpreted from a left-wing agenda at the moment.
It's the lawyers that are damaging the trust.
All right, OK. Who's going to go next, then? Uh-oh.
Trimble.
Trembling for Trimble.
I can't wait to see what Kai's going to think of this. Just yesterday, JD Vance gave what I thought was the most extraordinary speech that I have ever seen at the Munich Security Conference. But what has been so fascinating is the, frankly, unhinged response that has followed in the last less than 24 hours. So let's just take a quick look at this clip from Boris Pistorius, who is the German Defence Minister.
This is why I cannot just ignore what we heard before. I cannot not comment on the speech we heard by the US Vice President. We fight for your right to be against us. That is the motto, one of the mottos of the Bundeswehr, and it stands for our democracy. This democracy that was just called into question by the US Vice President, and not just the German democracy, but Europe as a whole. He spoke of the annulment of democracy, and if I understood him correctly, he compares the condition of Europe with the condition that prevails in some authoritarian regimes. Ladies and gentlemen, this is not acceptable.
I think the female voice added to the drama there, don't you think? So we've seen a number of responses very much like that one. We've seen, the BBC with their headline that JD Vance attacks Europe over speech and migration. We've got Carl Bildt, who is the co-chair of the European Council on Foreign Relations, saying that this speech was at best totally irrelevant to European or global security concerns, and at worst it was blatant interference in the German election campaign. We've seen Guy Verhofstadt, famed for being one of the most well-known Eurocrat apparatchiks going, who tweeted that about JD Vance's speech. He said, is this the US speaking or Russia? We also saw Mike Martin, the Liberal Democrat MP, who retweeted Rupert Lowe's praise of Vance, saying, everything you need to know about the Reform Party contained in one tweet. They are pro-Russia. We've also seen the Lib Dem Foreign Affairs spokesperson coming out against this, saying that he's not going to take advice about political freedoms from an acolyte of President Trump. The Green Party describing the speech as bizarre and dangerous. And what's so fascinating about this is because what are they actually responding to? Well, JD Vance didn't focus on what they expected. He didn't focus on Ukraine. He didn't focus on Russia or China. He focused on the values that are at the core of defence, and he asked Europeans to think about what it is that they are defending. He actually spoke up for the values of democracy and accountability. He spoke against censorship, and he spoke against mass migration, and urged leaders of the European countries at that conference. He urged them to listen to their electorates and to not be afraid of their people. Now, I think that was the most moving democratic speech, pro-democracy speech that I've ever heard. And the fact that they've got their knickers in so much of a twist over it shows us exactly why JD Vance is right.
I thought it was the most important speech of my lifetime, to be honest. I think the West...
Big call. Big call.
I do. I think Western civilization is in peril like it hasn't been in for all of my life, and that actually this is the sign that Europe needs to give itself a shot in the arm.
Yeah, I mean, the point that JD Vance was making is basically that, he kept mentioning the Cold War, and people are saying, he's attacking his own allies. But actually, he's just saying, that European countries are imitating those things that it fought to defend from its enemies in the past. Yeah. And so surely the core of our defence strategy has got to be making sure that we are actually defending what he called our shared civilization.
Just on those response tweets that the left in Europe put out, Scholz openly backed Biden for re-election, and they claim it's democratic foreign interference. The Liberal Democrats, of course, were anti-Trump. The Labour Party, anti-Trump, sent people over to America to campaign for Biden. The hypocrisy and the two-tier outrage that the left deliver in Britain and across Europe is utterly astounding. They have no recollection of the things that they've done, and yet they sit there and say, you can't interfere in our democracy. How dare they?
The threat to democracy president is literally doing press conferences every
yes.
Doge
transparency.
The Doge. Doge.
You're a man who would be comfortable and confident in a Soviet Europe. You must have thought that actually you could hear an element of truth there, that actually Europe is moving in a Soviet direction, but it's one you quite like.
Not at all. Look, Emma, you said this was an extraordinary speech. It was more of a tirade. This was a rant of a man who actually has a very clear agenda and had nothing to say about the defence of Ukraine and the defence as a consequence of Europe. Now, the people that you mentioned, obviously, it's very funny to put up these tweets and laugh at the left. Mike Martin was in the British Army for 10 years. Guy Verhofstadt is a former Prime Minister, an MEP for almost 2 years.
So what?
Carl Bildt was the Prime Minister of Sweden for 3 years. They have more foreign affairs and defence experience in their small finger than any of us do. And so I won't take the lecture.
And where's that
about
got Europe? Where is Europe right now? Is it in a good place?
We're in a very difficult place, and obviously
So who was
the
in
Europeans
charge?
are
Who got us
scrambling.
there? Who
The
got
Europeans are
us there?
scrambling now to figure out what to do next. Now, I think actually Britain.
Like Verhofstadt are the problem, and that kind of
Yeah,
just highlighted
and I
that
think
beautifully.
the reason why they're so sort of febrile about this is because he's kicked a nerve, because he's absolutely bang on.
No, it's because that speech came after there was Donald Trump had a 90-minute conversation with Putin without involving European allies, without involving Ukraine, that basically gives in to Russia.
No, it does not.
And
absolutely
hands away a bunch of the negotiating.
I am so
tactics
sick
or
of
the
hearing
points
this
of
argument that this
negotiation.
is some kind of appeasement. It's not. And
It
America
is.
has funded this
All right.
war. This is America's war.
Yesterday on Good Afternoon Britain, Tom Harwood and I interviewed an MP from Ukraine who said that she liked the speech because it's knuckling down on the values that when we talk about defending democracy, that's what we're talking about.
Exactly.
And so when you describe it as a tirade, the guy is an intellectual. It was a calm and collected laying out of his stall. Yes, he has an agenda. He's clear-sighted, unlike these people who hide their agenda
It's interesting.
and won't be accountable to their electorate.
He's serving as the vice president for a man who attempted a coup in the United States. That is not standing up for democracy. Honest to
I can
God.
see Darren's eyes. He knows that we need to move on. But I just ask you a very simple question. What is the alternative? No one can answer that question. What is the alternative to what Trump is saying?
Well, Europe ups its
Censorship.
defence spending, and the UK should take, I think, a leadership role in
That's
doing
also
that.
what JD Vance said in his speech, so you agree with him then?
No, I don't think, but in the absence
But
of
do you
the
agree
US
with-
funding,
do you
then
agree
of course
with-
we need to step up.
Do you agree with democracies being accountable and people being free to air their opinions?
Absolutely,
And
but I don't agree with his
and agree
characterisation.
With Europe raising its defence spending, then you agree with JD Vance?
I don't agree with his characterisation of Europe.
Well, I agree with JD Vance.